Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is the Syosset Library podcast of Turn the Page. You're here with Evelyn, Reader Services Librarian.
And Jessica, Community Engagement Specialist and Librarian.
I'm Jennifer Steil, so the author of Exile music, which just came out.
Welcome. We are so happy to be having you. And where are you recording from today?
I'm recording from London, England at the moment. We actually live in Uzbekistan, but we were just recently evacuated from Tashkent in March. And the Uzbek airspace is now sealed. So my husband's in Uzbekistan and we are outside. So we're not sure when we'll be reunited.
And you're not allowed to be there because of the virus, or what was the reason?
That's right. So my husband works for the Foreign Office, the British Foreign Office. So the Foreign Office evacuated us because if there's any chance that we could be ill, they would like us to be near the healthcare of our home country. Although we don't actually have a home in this country, so it was a bit of a scramble finding somewhere to live, but we did. So we have a roof at the moment.
Wow. Well, I was reading up your bio and you're very interesting. First, you moved to Yemen.
Yeah, I moved to Yemen in 2006 to become the editor-in-chief of a newspaper there.
Very interesting. And then I see that you lived in Bolivia, which is where a lot of Exile music takes place. Is that where you got the idea to write the book, was while you were living in Bolivia?
It is. So we moved to Bolivia in 2012 for my husband's work. He was then working for the European Union. And I was just finishing The Ambassador's Wife, my previous novel. And right around the beginning of when we first moved to Bolivia, my husband came home from work one night, having just met with the Austrian consul, and said, "Did you know that there were between 10 and 20,000 Jewish refugees from Europe living in La Paz during World War II?" And I hadn't known that. And this interested both of us. And right after that, I ended up meeting the son of one of these refugees who was born the year that his parents fled Poland.
Wow.
And landed in La Paz. So he became a really good friend, is still a friend. And his story was fascinating and horrible and horrifying. But he is an accomplished musician. He was a conductor of a symphony orchestra in Bolivia. And Tim had told me, my husband Tim, when he came home from the meeting with the Austrian consul, that a lot of the Jewish refugees were artists and musicians and other professional actors and professors who came over from Europe before, during, and actually immediately afterwards as well, after the war. So I then became interested. I then started to imagine what it must have been like to come from somewhere like Vienna, where you had a career and a family and a comfortable life, and were suddenly, after having lost everything, your family, your money, your belongings, your home, your career, and suddenly be in the middle of the Andes of Bolivia, where you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture. You're at 12,000 feet, and living at that altitude can be quite difficult depending on your makeup. There's no predicting how well people will do at altitude until you're actually there. So in thinking about this, I thought, I'd really be interested in exploring these stories and bringing some of them to life. I looked around for books about the situation of these particular refugees in Bolivia, and there were no novels at all. And I found some great nonfiction books, most memorably Hotel Bolivia by Leo Spitzer, but there really wasn't much else. And I thought it was important that this particular group of refugees have a bit of their story told. at least as best as I could imagine it, with a lot of research.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it so much. Do you want to just give a little synopsis of the book so that our
Sure.
listeners can?
Yeah, sure. So Exile Music tells a story of a family of Jewish Viennese musicians who flee Austria in 1939 and to Bolivia. And at that time, after 1938, only 3 countries in the world were still granting visas to Jews, and one of them was Bolivia. So my characters got visas to Bolivia not because it was somewhere they chose, but because it was the only place they could go to escape the Nazis. And so they come to La Paz. And my main character is a girl named Orly, and she is around 10 or 11 when they arrive in La Paz. She arrives with her parents. Her father is a musician with the Vienna Philharmonic, was a musician with the Vienna Philharmonic. He plays the viola. And her mother was an opera singer. And so Orly grew up in a household of music, and music is, well, I can talk about that later, I guess, but it's a lot. It plays a huge role in how the family adapts to their new environment.
Yeah,
it's wonderful. I'm really, really enjoying the story.
And I love that there's, a new part of history that's explored.
Yes, I was really, so much has been written about World War II, and yet so many people's lives were changed, and so many people died, and so many people who didn't die suffered crazy things happening to them that we probably will never hear anything close to all their stories. So I suppose it's not that surprising that there are still many left untold.
Yeah. No, their lives were so different when they got to Bolivia, but they were the lucky ones compared to the rest of their family. I mean, it's just unbelievable that the rest of the family didn't want to even attempt to come with them. They stayed back in Austria.
Right. Well, part of the reason for that is many of the visas granted at that time were agricultural visas, which
Right.
were granted only to people who were willing to do agricultural work. And there was this interesting project, Mauricio Hochschild, who was a mining baron, wanted to save some Jewish people. And so he said, well, they'll help the Bolivian economy if we bring them in and we create these colonies down in the jungle. Then they could help us grow food. But of course, these were mostly urban Jews who had never farmed, and they were in the jungle. They were exposed to tropical diseases they had no natural immunity to. So many of them died. It was an environment they didn't understand. And so these colonies were, by and large, a failure. Although there were some people who arrived on agricultural visas and didn't go to the colonies and who stayed in La Paz. So there were plenty. Most people did stay in La Paz aside from those. I think there were just a couple of colonies.
Well, Booklist gave it a starred review, and I'm just going to read what they said. They said, a beautiful coming-of-age tale, moving, evocative, and well-researched. This is sure to linger in readers' minds long after the last page has been turned, and I definitely agree with that. It's really wonderful. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you.
Yeah, really well written. I really love Orly. She's a great character.
Thank you.
Yeah, her mom is a little depressed right now, so I'm feeling bad for her. She hasn't sang at all. It's sad.
Yeah, I think, we all deal with grief in different ways and loss
Right.
and trauma in different ways. And some people were able to go on with their lives after evacuation and trauma and losing family members, and some weren't.
Yeah.
There is someone in the book who is unable to overcome trauma, and some, like Orly, who are some more resilient and are able to get on with their lives in a way, although completely changed.
Yes. She misses her best friend, Annalise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, who she has to leave behind in Austria, and who has her own interesting journey. I don't want to give away what happens to Annalisa, but yeah, she has her own journey. And the father and Orly, the father being a viola player, he's unable to survive without music. So music is his reason for surviving. That's what he uses. He has to keep playing. And he also, because he's always been part of something larger than himself, he's always been part of this orchestra. He feels that he needs to be part of something like that, and immediately tries to gather musicians around him so that they can play together. And Orly tries to figure out what instrument she wants to play. But both of them, Orly ends up picking up a Bolivian instrument. Her father ends up feeling this newfound freedom in learning about other kinds of sounds, Bolivian sounds, South American sounds, sounds that he was not familiar with playing before he moved to South America. And so both of them find something to embrace in the new culture, whereas the mother, she's unable to sing. Singing for her requires joy, requires an embrace of life that she no longer feels.
Yeah, it also requires her son, which she's missing very much.
Right. So, right, when they flee Austria, they leave behind Orly's brother, Willie, who is supposed to be joining them in the pause. And I'm not going to say what happens to him either.
Right. Don't give that away. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. So I see that you did record one of your books as an audio book. You were the narrator.
That's right.
You didn't do this one you didn't record?
No, so I recorded my first book because my first book, The Woman Who Fell from the Sky, was a memoir about, it was about the time I spent running the newspaper in Yemen. And because I was writing in my own voice, and I knew how I was supposed to sound. And I do have a background in theater, so it's not that I'm completely without voice training.
No, you have a great voice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I'm just like listening to you speak, and it's very soothing.
Yes, it's a wonderful voice.
Thank you. I hope I'm not putting you to sleep. But
no, without a doubt, no.
So and that's why I did that first book. And actually, with my second book, I had originally planned to record that book. But because part of that book is told from the point of view of a British ambassador and part of it is told by the point of view of his American wife, they hired this really well-known British actor to read opposite me, whereupon I was completely intimidated and thought, I can't put myself up against this really established British actor. I better just let the professionals handle it, which is what I did with that book. So, so other actors recorded that, and with Exile music, it's also recorded by professionals. I knew that there was no way I was going to come up with perfect pronunciation for the German and the Spanish, and there are words. Even doing readings, I have to kind of apologize for my lack of German. At least I speak Spanish, so I know how that should sound. But the German, my husband helped me a lot with that. He's the German speaker. So
I'm just curious, what is Uzbekistan like?
It's an interesting country. It's got some really stunning architecture, some beautiful mosques, and with these beautiful turquoise and blue mosaic covering their walls, just really beautiful. There's a really wonderful opera and music and theater and dance. There's all that, and that's wonderful. We went to, before I was evacuated, we were able to get to lots of dance performances and music, and that was really nice. It's affordable, unlike here in London.
What's the language they speak there?
So they speak a mixture of languages. So Russian is, because Uzbekistan, like its neighbors, the other stands, it's surrounded by stands. So Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan. So it was all part of the Uzbekistan was part of the USSR.
Okay.
So that's why they speak Russian, but they of course have their own languages as well. So that means in Uzbekistan they speak Uzbek, but there's also, depending on different parts of the country, will also speak Tajik or other languages, other more regional languages. So
that's incredible. It sounds like a really incredible place, and I'm looking at pictures, and it does look absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's stunning, and the artistry is stunning, and the textiles are stunning. it was interesting for me, having lived in Yemen for 4 years, Jordan a little bit, and been to a lot of places in the Middle East, to be in a Muslim country, because Uzbekistan is a Muslim country, that is nothing like any Muslim country I've ever been in. Just it underscores the diversity of Muslim cultures. These people, because they've lived under communism, where they were not allowed to practice Islam, where they were not allowed to attend mosques. The women do not cover because they were, they had their veils publicly ripped off if they tried, and men were shaved if they grew beards. So the people dress very much like Russians, like Americans. I mean, you see women in miniskirts. You see hardly any people with covered hair. And so it was quite different from Yemen, where everyone was covered completely. The women were all covered completely. Most of them even cover their faces. And so I would say it has very little in common with Yemen. So it's just interesting to be somewhere that's so different and yet shares a religion with the countries I've lived in the past.
Do you think that it contributed to helping you write Exile music, kind of traveling to so many different places, and I guess envisioning the journey of someone who would move to such a different place than they're used to?
Definitely. I suppose, in my case, it's luckily, it's a chosen exile that I've created for myself. So I've been kind of a voluntary exile since 2006. I haven't lived in the United States. And so I've become, I'm a bit of a novelty junkie. I like being in new places. I like walking new routes. I like learning new languages. I like everything. I like all these new environments. And I get restless pretty easily. So it suits me as a person to move around. And I because I feel this constant sense of both feeling at home and being acutely aware that I'm not at home at the same time. Even when I go back to the US, I don't feel at home anymore because I've lived outside of it for so long. So in a way, I feel like I'm always nostalgic for somewhere else because there's people I love everywhere now. There isn't one place I could go back to that has all the people I love, because people I love are all around the globe. And this is wonderful, but it also means I'm in a perpetual state of longing for these people and these other lives I've lived and cities I've lived in.
Wow, you have a fascinating life. Now, where did your daughter go to school in Uzbekistan?
Well,
Do they have an American school or?
She's actually never been to an American school. She has spent her so she was 2.5 when we moved to Bolivia, and she at first was in a Bolivian nursery school. But when she was ready to start kindergarten, she moved to the French school, largely because the French school allowed her to keep learning Spanish while learning French. So by the time we left Bolivia, she spoke both Spanish and French, and we just transferred her because we went to London for a few years before going to Uzbekistan. The French schools are exactly the same all around the world, from the point of view of curriculum anyway. So it's very easy to transfer from one to the next. So she transferred from the French school in Bolivia to the French school in London to the French school in Tashkent. So she's still at the French school in Tashkent. Although we're not 100% sure if she'll continue there or if we'll make a different decision. But it's been nice for her to be in the French school because it means that it's so easy to learn languages when you're young.
Right. So how many languages does she speak now?
Well, she speaks Spanish, French, and English, and speaks French and English like a native speaker. Her Spanish is getting rusty as the longer we're away from Bolivia, and she's learning Russian at the moment.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So are you working on anything new at the moment?
I am. So I'm working on a PhD in creative writing at the University of Birmingham here in London.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah. So it's the most wonderful experience ever because I'm used to writing books all alone in the dark. And now there's someone whose job it is to read what I write every month. And I think this is wonderful. It's a huge luxury. I love talking to my supervisor every month. I always have a million new ideas every time I talk to him. So I am on my second draft of a new novel, which is completely unlike everything I've written before. It is also South American, mostly Bolivian. It is almost exclusively female. It's about a female revolutionary gay underworld. So
Wow.
that's what I'm working on now. Yeah.
We look forward to that. Absolutely. Any idea when it may come out, or you still have plenty of work to do?
Well, I think I still have some work to do. I mean, I don't think it's in terrible shape. I have work to do before I show it to my agent, and then I'll her opinion is the most important, as she's kind of my gatekeeper. So once she gives the okay, we can start sending it out to publishers.
Mm.
But I'm pretty excited about it. So
as I read Exile music, I definitely picture it as a movie. Any chance that something like that might happen?
Well, there's always a chance. I would love to see this as a film. I think it would be a spectacular film.
Absolutely.
Especially with the background of the Andes. Bolivia, I mean, I know that it would be, less expensive to film in Bolivia than a lot of other places. And La Paz has the most stunning backdrop you could want for a story. You've got Mount Illimani overlooking the city, which is just so beautiful. And so, I mean, I would really love to see this as a film. My last book was optioned, but then that option expired, as often happens in this world. So I'd love to see that too, because it's a dramatic book about a kidnapping. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely wonderful. And I know it is always crazy because we do hear from a lot of authors whose books are optioned, and it's a whole process. I think sometimes they're optioned several times before anything really happens.
Right. And options frequently expire. And someone told me a heartening story yesterday about someone whose option was renewed over and over for 11 years. And then eventually they let it expire, and then someone else optioned it. So hope never dies here. So.
Yeah, no, I could picture it totally as I'm reading it. The way you describe everything is so wonderful that you see it in your mind as a movie. So I definitely see that happening. I'm sorry I don't have any connections, but
well, hopefully someone listening has a relative in Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, I definitely can see it. It's definitely on that big screen. It's wonderful.
Well, thanks again. This has been really lovely, not just chatting about your books, but also your experiences, and how they contribute to how you to yourself as a storyteller.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
So we hope to interview you again in the future.
Thank you. I'd love that.
Hopefully we will all be, I don't know, in some state of normalcy by then.
Yes, hopefully we'll be maybe not in our homes, and who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This is
you.
Evelyn from the Syosset Library. Turn the page.
And Jessica.
As we close this chapter of Turn the Page. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.